This cemetery has been quite the handful. As you can see, this is what it looked like on the first day when we got to work here. But after 4 hours, this is what it looked like instead. The biggest problem we had was the gigantic pile of rocks that had been put on it from neighboring fields for several decades, and the headstones were in pieces under all of it. But my friend Jim Ford turned that pile into the most beautiful rock walls I have ever seen. The second problem was there was no record for the cemetery that we could find, but neighbors said that they thought there were about 5 headstones here. However, we had no idea if that was true and where they would have been. So we called in the big guns. This is Jim Flint. He works for a company called EastCom Associates that specializes in ground penetrating radar, service, and training. In a nutshell, basically that machine sends a signal into the ground, much like how a fish finder works, but in this case, it shows any disturbances in the soil, like where someone could have possibly dug a grave. It's not a perfect science. It does depend on soil composition, and tree roots can really mess up the signal too, which he's explaining here. So he just rolls this machine across the ground just like you would mow your lawn, and any hyperbola or disturbances that show up on the screen, we mark the location for with a flag. And as you can see on the middle of this screen, there's one right there in the middle at about the right depth of 6 feet. It's not perfect because, as you can see, these flags mark the location of every disturbance we found in the soil, but there's definitely not this many bodies here. We still need to cut down the big branch on this mostly dead tree before I can put the stones back up so they aren't crushed by it, but based on our 5 strongest hits that happen to be in 2 rows, we have a rough idea of where the headstones most likely were. Obviously, we don't know which one goes where, but we figured standing them back up in the wrong order was still better than them staying in a pile against a tree. After building his rock walls, Jim Ford spent hours researching this family, so if you're familiar with Find a Grave, you can search for the Church Family Cemetery in Madison, New York to read a story of the 4 we know are here. Who the 5th one could be is still a mystery. Either way, this was a super cool experience. And this last stone I'm going to show you is really neat because it has practice numbers carved into it.